Be sure to subscribe to the channel, and let's promote respect for the Royal Guard together. Let the whole world see how many of us there are.
When a Royal Guardsman suddenly collapsed during the changing of the guard, the crowd froze in shock. But what happened next surprised everyone. Early morning in London brought a special atmosphere. Sunlight gently bathed the facade of Buckingham Palace, enhancing its grandeur. The square in front of the palace gradually filled with tourists who took the best spots along the barriers. Anticipation filled the air. People chatted, snapped selfies, and discussed how to perfectly frame the moment of the changing of the guard. The lively chatter and laughter mixed with the occasional shouts of children and the clicks of cameras. Along the sidewalk, souvenir vendors lined up like a parade, offering everything from miniature figurines of guardsmen to keychains bearing the royal crown. The atmosphere felt like the prelude to a theatrical performance, where everyone knew their roles except for the tourists, who were simultaneously the audience and part of the spectacle. At last, the moment everyone had been waiting for arrived. The dull yet precise sound of boots marching on the cobblestones echoed in the distance, heralding the arrival of something important. Around the corner, the royal guards began to appear. The crowd instinctively fell silent, all eyes fixed on the scarlet uniforms and towering bearskin hats. The guards looked like a painting brought to life. Flawless, majestic, perfect. Every movement was executed with precision, as if part of a choreographed routine. The raising of legs, the turning of heads, the alignment of ranks. It all made their march hypnotic. Tourists couldn't look away, craning their necks to catch every detail of their uniforms. The vibrant scarlet tunics, the gleaming gold buttons, and the strict precision of their lines. At the center of this spectacle was a guardsman named James. Tall and well-built, with a perfect posture, he embodied discipline. His face remained impassive, as was expected of a royal guardsman, but his eyes radiated quiet confidence. James was 25 years old, and years of service had shaped him into the epitome of professionalism. For James, this ceremony was a routine part of his duty. Every step, every turn of his head had been rehearsed countless times before the ceremony even began. Yet, he understood that for the people behind the barriers, this was not just a guard change. It was a moment they would remember for the rest of their lives. Many had traveled from far corners of the world to witness this spectacle, and James knew his role was to be the embodiment of what his country took pride in. The crowd, enchanted by the ceremony, barely breathed. Tourists closest to the barrier froze, determined not to miss a single detail. James remained focused, but somewhere in the back of his mind, a thought flickered. Today, they'll take home a story, and I'll be a part of it. Standing in formation, James knew every movement by heart. Every step had been perfected through years of service, but today something felt off. Even before the march began, he had sensed a strange pressure in his temples and a faint heaviness in his chest, an unusual sensation for these ceremonies. He dismissed the thoughts. Weakness was not an option for a guardsman. As the march began, his body started to send alarming signals. His head felt dizzy, his legs grew weak as if made of rubber, and with every step, the sensation worsened. James tried to maintain his posture, but he could feel his body working at its limit. The sun, which had felt so pleasant earlier, now seemed merciless. Its rays penetrated the thick scarlet tunic, turning it into an oven. The bearskin hat, normally a shield against the cold, felt like an unbearable weight pressing down on his head. Sweat trickled down his forehead and slid under his collar. He took several deep breaths, attempting to steady himself, but each breath seemed thick and heavy. The noise of the crowd, once faint and distant, became a muffled roar. Even the synchronized sound of his fellow guards' boots turned into a distant drumbeat in his mind. Shadows began to dance before his eyes. the world around him blurred. James strained his vision, trying to focus on his line and the rhythm of the march, but with each step it became harder. For a fleeting moment his gaze met the eyes of a tourist behind the barrier, a woman holding a camera, recording him intently. It reminded him that his duty was to maintain composure. "I can't let them down," he thought, mustering all his remaining strength. But his body refused to obey. A few more steps, and he felt the ground beneath him grow soft, as if he were walking on sand. His head spun violently, and suddenly everything around him began to fade to black. He no longer felt the weight of the hat, the heat of the tunic, or the noise of the crowd. The last thing he saw was the sunlight piercing through the sky before his body gave way, and he began to fall. The Royal Guard's march continued with its usual precision. Their boots struck the cobblestones in rhythm, scarlet tunics gleamed under the sun, and tall bearskin hats added grandeur to the scene. But suddenly, at the heart of this perfect formation, something unthinkable occurred. James, positioned in the front row, began to sway. His movements, previously confident and synchronized with the others, became unnatural. The crowd, observing the procession, noticed immediately. A gasp escaped from one of the tourists, and those in the front rows reached for their cameras to capture the unexpected moment. James's scarlet tunic, a symbol of discipline and formality, slowly tilted to the side. His legs, accustomed to enduring miles of marching, suddenly betrayed him. James stopped, then tried to take another step, but his body refused to cooperate. He wavered forward and, as if in slow motion, fell to his knees. For a brief moment, he remained in that position, as if he was about to rise again, but then he lost his balance entirely and collapsed face first onto the cobblestones. The crowd froze. The square, which moments ago was filled with the sounds of cameras and murmurs, fell into a stunned silence. People couldn't believe their eyes. A guardsman, a symbol of royal discipline and endurance, was lying on the ground. His still body, clad in the bright scarlet tunic, seemed oddly out of place amidst the majestic march, which continued uninterrupted. The other guards paid no attention to their fallen comrade. They continued their march with the same impeccable precision, as if nothing had happened. Their faces remained impassive, their steps perfectly synchronized. Watching this, the crowd felt a mix of admiration and confusion. It was like a scene from a play where one actor had suddenly fallen out of character, yet the others continued performing. Unease rippled through the onlookers. Some shouted, "He needs help! Why isn't anyone doing anything?" A few tried to push closer but were stopped by security. Those in the back raised their phones, recording the scene to share on social media. Others, familiar with the strict protocols, shook their heads, explaining to their neighbors, "It's the rules. They can't break formation. Help will come, but only after the ceremony is complete." For what felt like an eternity, James lay motionless on the ground as the guards marched past him. The sight was both dramatic and surreal, as if the world had split into two realities, one where a man had fallen and needed help, and another where discipline and protocol reigned supreme. A few minutes later, 2 security officers and a medic emerged from a nearby building. They carefully lifted James and carried him off the square, all without disrupting the ceremony's orderliness. The crowd, though breathing a collective sigh of relief, couldn't hide their astonishment. Journalists present in the square immediately began interviewing witnesses. One tourist, a man in his 50s with a camera in hand, shared emotionally. "It was incredible. He tried to hold on until the very end, a true professional." Videos of the fall quickly began circulating on social media. Captions ranged from, "A symbol of discipline in a tough moment," to, "Why didn't anyone help the guardsmen sooner?" Debates flared, with people arguing over whether protocols should be adjusted for such situations. The following day, it was revealed that James had suffered from heat exhaustion, but had already recovered and was ready to return to duty. In an interview, he stated, "Guardsmen don't give up. It's part of our job to be a symbol of resilience. I'm proud I held my position to the end, even though it wasn't easy." This story served as a reminder that behind the perfect posture and polished uniforms are real people who dedicate themselves fully to their duty. For the crowd of tourists, that day became more than just a part of the changing of the guard. It was a moment where discipline and humanity intersected in real time.